So, government's back open. A lot of chatter going on out there, and I feel like I have a real responsibility to just make sure that everybody's got their arms wrapped around some of the latest chatter that affects the real estate industry. And you can't go far into the media these days without hearing about the next best idea from our government. What is President Donald Trump talking about with this 50-year mortgage idea? What could this possibly mean for borrowers? And for us, what could it mean for real estate pros? A 50-year mortgage option as a part of a pitch to improve the housing affordability. Is this just something our president is trying to leverage to try to force feed some other idea, or is this something we should consider? Let's get into it. Welcome to the show, everybody. So, President Donald Trump has floated a new 50-year mortgage option as part of his pitch to help improve the housing affordability crisis that this country is in. He describes the idea as a way to trim monthly payments by stretching the loans over 5 decades as opposed to three. Now, a key architect of this concept is the FHFA, the Federal Housing and Finance Agency. Those of you that follow politics, this is Director Bill Pulte that we're talking about here. He is the one who says the agency is working on a 50-year mortgage and some other options, such as portable, assumable loans, all of these things that could be supported by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which of course are the biggest movers and shakers in the mortgage industry. For real estate pros, the core question is going to be, are these options practical? How would a 50-year term affect my buyer's budget? What are the trade-offs in equity and long-term costs going to be? And then what regulatory changes are going to be needed for these types of loans to be widely offered? We're going to break it down a little bit today. We're going to talk about what's actually being proposed, because the last thing we need is a whole bunch of media folks telling us how things operate. You should be going to the media to understand that there is a principle being proposed in the government. Stop going to the media for opinion. They were never designed to be opinion-based authors, and they need to stop doing it. Their job is to report the fact, and if they don't have supporting factual documentation, they need to learn how to shut up. Honestly, they're clouding the world with their own political agenda, and quite frankly, as you can probably hear it in my voice, I'm sick of it. So, we're also going to talk about how a 50-year mortgage changes the math of what we're talking about in the mortgage industry. We're going to talk about some of the regulatory hurdles that this is going to come up against, the QM framework more particularly. We're going to talk about some potential benefits, some key risks, and then what the real estate pros should start looking for. My brokers out there, thank you for joining. I see a bunch of you clapping. This is awesome. We want you engaged, so please post your questions in the bottom. For those of you that are new with us today, make sure that you like the page, make sure that you subscribe, because this is our job to keep you informed. So, break it down. What is actually being proposed in this? According to what we can gather so far, and that's it, right? And I make sure to tease through multiple venues and multiple avenues of information before I quote anything. The administration is currently exploring whether Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac could guarantee a 50-year, fully amortized fixed rate mortgage alongside the same 30-year option that dominates today's market. Ultimately, if you walk into a loan, they don't even talk to you about the 15 and 20-year options that are available, because it's a more lucrative option for most of the lenders to go straight to the 30 years. It's also the most common viable option for buyers because it stretches the term to still a life legacy point of control, and it comes with some decent payment option. It allows for just the right payment mix on your P to I payout. So details are still kind of sparse on this. So I don't want to dig in too deep, but this is a hot topic and I want to make sure to get in front of it. There is no finalized product design. There is no announced eligibility criteria. There is no implementation timeline. This is not showing up tomorrow. This is not showing up this year. At this stage, a 50-year term mortgage is going to be best understood as conceptual at best. It is concept under review. This is not a ready to launch program. Very, very different. So when you are rushing over to your mortgage lender and saying, hey, I can now afford to buy a house because at a 50-year term, this is going to be less money for me. And what was keeping me from buying a home before was the monthly payment. So my debt to income ratio was staggered. It's going to take a hell of a lot more than this to fix your problem. If you are not ready to buy a house, you should not be buying a house. If you are having to fit a square peg in a round hole for you to buy a property, you should not be doing it. Ultimately, the American public is victim to the pitch of the American dream. I need to be a homeowner. Obviously, I'm in the real estate industry. I want you to be a homeowner too, but it needs to make sense. It needs to not put you in a financial risk. It needs to be something that you're already doing. You can already pay this note, or you're already paying it elsewhere. And then you need to go through a class, quite honestly, so that you understand that it's not just paying a note like when you were a renter. There are other costs of ownerships in there that you need to understand. And when repairs come up, you better have put the money away to make it happen. Personally, I'm a proponent to an additional escrow being put in place for most of our first time home buyers so that when major repairs come up, they already have 5 to 10% put aside in a separate escrow account that they can pull from to do the repairs on their home that are necessary to make sure that they don't end up with a busted water heater or a bad air conditioning unit and not be able to do something about it, ultimately degrading and putting their home in a worse position of disrepair. Lucky for you, they don't listen to me out there because that would be the next thing that I'm pushing on. So, back to it. The backdrop on this is still the rate shock that we have been dealing with for the past several years. So after peaking above 7%, the average 30-year mortgage rates have eased, but they still remain in the 6% range. National home prices are still significantly higher than before the pandemic. That combination has pushed the common debt to income ratio to a limit for many buyers, and particularly first time home buyers, that practically prices them out of the market. So, how would a 50-year mortgage change that math? A 50-year mortgage would be a conventional fixed rate loan spread over 600 months instead of 360 months. That structure lowers the monthly payment required to amortize the principal, but it increases the total interest paid over the life of the loan and slows the pace at which the borrower can actually build equity. One of the benefits of a 30-year mortgage is if you've been in the house from 7 to 10 years, chances are you've paid down enough of the principal. Equally, the housing market has consistently increased, so you should have a good chunk of equity built into your home that you can either leverage for other things like a second home purchase or repairs or refinancing options, or better than that, as an investment. You're selling your home and you're taking that money and you're able to buy your next house with it. That was the purpose behind getting people affordably involved in the housing industry. The problem is that the structure is going to lower the monthly payment. However, the slow in the borrower's equity means that when it comes time for you to sell your property at now 7 years, because that average isn't going to change, even though you have a 50-year mortgage, the amount of principal that you've paid down is minimal. You would now be stretching to a 15 or even a 20-year plan before it would make fiscal sense for you to sell the home. Analysis cites recent coverage that I've been watching that on a mid-priced home, stretching a fixed rate loan from 30 to 50 years will cut the monthly principal interest payment by a few $100, depending on the rate, obviously. But it also keeps borrowers in a high loan to value territory for a much longer time period. It will add six figures or more in a lifetime worth of interest. Charges terms, it trades a short term payment relief for a more expensive and a slower path to full ownership. On top of that, we need to talk about the QM framework because there are regulatory hurdles that are in place that may not ever allow this to take shape. And I want you to understand this may never take shape. The current administration is trying to push back on the things that we have gotten comfortable about in all of our financial markets, and that includes the housing market. He is trying to, as a real estate investor himself, he's trying to make it possible for one of the largest complaints in the United States, aka I can't buy a house. What's my path to home ownership? He's trying to make sure we have an option. He's not trying to push everybody into a 50-year deal. He's working with Bill Pulte to make sure that the American people have opportunity. We have to make sure that it makes good sense. So, today's mortgage regulation that exists is built around the 30-year term as the standard maximum term. Under the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's ability to repay, qualified mortgage rules, loans that receive a QM status generally must be fully amortizing and have a term no more than 30 years. The industry summarized the rule list as a maximum 30-year term as the core of the QM feature set. So to roll out, excuse me, to roll out 50-year mortgages at scale through government-sponsored enterprises, regulators now have to get involved, and they have to decide whether to adjust the QM framework or simply position 50-year loans as non-QM or otherwise specialized projects. That decision is certainly going to affect the investor's appetite. It's going to change capital requirements, as well as how lenders have to document suitability and explain this trade-off for customers. Again, it has to make risk sense to a lender that if you're a first-time home buyer at 20 years old and you bought a house, you can't pay off this house until you're past retirement age of 70 plus years old. If you are the average home buyer in the United States and you buy a home in your 30s, tack on 50 years, you are well into your 80s before you could possibly pay off your first home. Now, let's be realistic. We know good and well 80% of the people that buy a home do not pay it off. They simply refinance it or sell it and buy something else, blah, blah, blah. It is the consistent cycle keeping people in the mortgage game. This may force people to stay in their original purchased home longer, which could also cripple the current market. One of the things that we're having struggles with now is a large percentage of homeowners in this market had a low interest rate when they bought their home. So selling it in a 6% rate doesn't make any sense to them. And they're losing all of that potential P&I payment leverage. And then buying something else at 6%, they're having to buy something much, much smaller and at a much lower cost so that they could, instead of the old theory of take your home, invest in the payments for 7 to 8 years, sell that home, take that equity, move it into your next home. That is a more generous down payment, putting you in a stronger position to move forward. Now it would potentially be the opposite. In this market, you're taking a 2 to a 3% interest rate. You have a nice big house. You're having to take now for the same, let's say $400,000 mortgage, to get that same $400,000 mortgage at an interest and at a payment that you can still afford. You're having to buy a much lower property. So you'll probably have to buy at a $300,000 marker or lower, depending on the market taxes, to have that same total cost of ownership. So, still a lot to be determined as to whether this might move some things along in the housing market, but whether or not it would help the people that are having the problems of being priced out of the market today remains to be seen. To roll out these 50-year mortgages at a scale through those enterprises, trust me, the lenders have got to understand not only a strong sales pitch, but must understand what the trade-off and risk is to the customers. And ultimately, they're going to have to redesign all of their qualification sheets to make sure people can actually do it without reapproaching the ageism problem of, hey, I don't know if you look like you're in good enough health to have a 50-year mortgage. That will never be allowed. God forbid we actually add health and condition of health as a protected status in the United States. Wouldn't that be a killer? Let's talk about some of the potential benefits and weigh out the key risks to this. So supporters inside the administration are arguing that a 50-year option could certainly help payment constrained borrowers, especially the younger borrowers in a high cost market. Qualifying for a home has been more and more difficult. Proven numbers, we can't argue with facts. For clients who maintain the obstacle in the monthly payment arena rather than a term problem, a longer term could make the difference between remaining renters and actually entering the buyer's market, particularly if they expect to move or refinance within a decade. Now, housing economists and industry groups have been a lot more cautious. Experts are quoting Politico. They're warning that ultra long mortgages could lead to households with thinner equity cushions. So, longer increase of vulnerability if prices flatten or, God forbid, fall. They're also noting that more buyers could carry mortgage debt into their 60s and their 70s, and that lengthening that term does not resolve the underlying supply shortage that's driving these higher prices. So these are all things that you have to consider. Real estate pros, listen up. For now, the 50-year mortgage is simply a proposal. They are looking for ideas to help fix the structure. Personally, I could absolutely see a 50-year lien on a business versus traditional real estate, but that all remains to be seen how a product like this would actually work for anyone. This is not a product that you can just put on a rate sheet, and you certainly can't discuss it with your clients now like it's a reality. It is as far from a reality as getting back to the 3% interest rates. But clients are already hearing about it and they're looking for you for context. So, again, a few practical talking points for you so that you know what you're doing. And yes, listen up. Here's where it gets spicy. Stop talking out of both sides of your face. You have an obligation to your clients to be honest and to have integrity in helping them make their decisions. They are not the expert, you are. This is not a transactional sales organization. This is a this is an industry where people need leadership on how they can move forward without crushing their family's hopes and dreams on the largest investment they are ever going to make in their lives. And you have a responsibility of keeping it honest. So pay attention to what I'm about to tell you. Oh, let me back up just a second. First, I need you to emphasize that a 50-year mortgage, if it emerges, will lower monthly payments by extending the term, but at the higher cost of a lifetime interest and a slower equity build. Ultimately, if you're paying off the same house in 50 years versus 30 years, logically, it's going to take you 20 more years to pay it off. So that line to pay off is much slower because you're stretching it across a 50-year term. Emphasize that risk to your clients. Second, comparing it with existing tools, such as the affordable rate mortgage. Those have caps, permanent or temporary rate buydowns, programs like FHA and VA and USDA loans. These may address similar affordability issues with hopefully better trade offs. Finally, encourage your buyers to think about the likelihood and the holding period, career trajectory, retirement goals before they take out a long term debt like this. As the FHFA, the CFPB, and the GSEs all decide whether or not to move forward with an option like this, the key question in the industry is going to be, where does a 50-year loan fit within the QM framework? How are they pricing it? How are they underwriting it? And whether or not it will remain a niche tool for specific borrowers, or whether it will evolve into a broader part of the mortgage landscape. For those of you that don't listen to the show very often, I am Alexander Bartneski. I am the what will be the lifetime broker of Keystone Property Consulting Firm. We are a consulting firm first that leverages real estate knowledge and real estate capability with real estate agents and with brokers to make sure that the largest investment strategy in the United States, the housing market, can be leveraged with truth and with integrity. If you need advice, if you need understanding as to what you should be doing less, there's zero obligation to do business with us after an initial consultation. So please give us a call, get on our books. We'll set an appointment with you. We're happy to discuss your concerns or your future goals so that we can set a roadmap to getting you into the housing market when you're ready. Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend. This will be our last show for 2025. I now take my 6-week break and enjoy my family time and my vacations. We will be back in January. Looking forward to seeing you, and I'm sure by that time there will be a lot more to talk about. Stay truthful, stay honest, and as a beacon of truth, make absolutely sure that you've got facts to support as evidentiary for everything that you're telling your clients. Have a great new year, everyone. We'll see you in 2026.